A room with 40 clocks in it does not tick so much as rain. Every second lands a little behind its neighbor, and the sounds run together into something soft and even, like water working under a wooden floor. I learned that sound at 16, in a repair shop on the main street of a mill town in southern New Hampshire. The mills had closed before I was born, and the town had been letting out its breath ever since, one papered-over storefront at a time. The shop stayed open because old men keep watches, and old towns keep old men. It belonged to Emmett Rowe, who had mended clocks on that street for 50 years and had the bent back to show for it. My mother knew him from church, and the spring I was suspended from school, she marched me down and asked if he had use for a boy with idle hands. He looked at me the way he looked at a watch somebody had dropped, which is to say kindly and without much hope. He said he could not pay much, and my mother said that was fine because I was not worth much yet. I started with the broom, and it was a month before he let me touch anything with a spring in it. The bench ran along the back wall under a lamp with a green shade, above little drawers labeled in a hand so small it looked typed. And everywhere, on every wall and shelf, the clocks. Mantel clocks and schoolhouse clocks, a banjo clock with a painted ship, and one tall walnut case in the corner by the coat rack. Every morning began the same way. He would hang his coat, put the kettle on the hot plate, and move through the shop with his ring of keys and cranks, winding. He wound the repairs and the finished work waiting to be claimed, and then he did a thing I did not understand at first. He slid open the long case under the counter where the unclaimed watches slept, dozens of them, each in a yellowed envelope with a tag. Some of the tags had dates from before my parents were married. Owners who had moved away or lost the ticket or gone into the ground owing him $4 for a cleaning. He wound every one, a few careful turns each, all the way down the rows. When I finally asked him why, he did not look up from the bench. "A watch that sits goes stiff," he said, "the oil gums and the pivots wear. And besides," he said, "they should not have to lose the habit just because somebody else did." The town had its own way of talking about watches. I heard it first from the barber 2 doors down, who wore his father's wristwatch and tapped its glass when he made a point. He said a watch that rides one wrist long enough learns the man, the way a dog learns a whistle. The old ladies said it plainer, bringing their dead husbands' pocket watches in to be cleaned for grandsons. A watch worn long enough follows its owner the whole way. Mr. Rowe never nodded along to any of that, and he never laughed at it either. He would just take the watch in his open palm, the way you take an egg, and write out the tickets. I was 2 years in when the Tuesday came that I still think about. A woman came in near, closing with her father's wristwatch in a plastic bag. It was a plain steel piece from the 50s, the kind the mill gave a man for 25 years, with his initials on the back. She said it had been running fine on his dresser, then on Tuesday it stopped, and she wanted it going before the funeral. Mr. Rowe turned it over once and asked, in the same voice he used for rattles and loose crowns, what time it had stopped. She said 10 minutes past 2. Then a strange look crossed her, as if the fact were only now arriving, and she said that was when the hospital had called her, near enough to the minute. The shop went on raining all around us, 40 clocks landing one behind another, and for a while nobody spoke. He carried the watch back to the bench and put the loop in his eye, and I stood at his shoulder the way I had been taught. The mainspring still held better than 2 days of wind. Nothing in the train was broken, nothing was jammed, and there was not one thing wrong with that watch, except that it had quit at 2:10 on a Tuesday. He cleaned it anyway, oiled it, and set it going by the beat of his own bench clock. It started on the first turn of the crown, and kept fine time all the week we watched it. He did not charge her, and the ticket, in his small careful hand, said only, "No fault found." After she had gone I asked what made it stop, and he looked at the door a moment before he answered. "Nothing made it stop," he said, "some of them just go along." The walnut clock in the corner was the other thing I got wrong. It was the oldest clock in the shop and the best made, an 8-day movement in a case the color of strong tea, and it ran 5 minutes slow. And not roughly 5 either, but 5 to the minute, week after week, as if slowness were a setting somebody had chosen. Regulating a clock like that is no great trick, and by my 3rd year I could do it in an afternoon, and I said so. I had a screwdriver in my hand and one foot toward the corner when his voice came across the shop, even and unhurried. "Leave that one be," he said. So I left it, and I let the question sit most of a winter before I asked. He told it plainly, with the lamp off and the kettle going, on an evening when snow had emptied the street. In the winter of 1961, the man who kept this shop before him owned the same clock, and in those days it ran true. A young fellow on the early shift at the mill used to check it through the window each morning, having no watch of his own. That January the clock took to losing time, and the old owner, being busy, let it slide. So one iron-cold morning, the young fellow read the window glass, trusted it, and came through the mill gate 5 minutes behind the whistle. The foreman had already sent the early men up to the drying floor, and the young fellow was still signing the late book when the floor above let go. Of the men who had gone up on the whistle, 3 came down with the timbers, and the whole town wore black that spring. The young fellow stood in the yard, 5 minutes on the wrong side of the whistle, and every one of those minutes had come out of this clock. When the old owner heard, he went to set it right at last, and then he thought better of it and never touched the screw again. Neither did the man who kept the shop after him. Mr. Rowe never said straight out that the young fellow was him. I did the arithmetic quietly against the dates on his framed certificates, and then I put the arithmetic away. From that January to this, the clock has lost exactly 5 minutes and not a second more, as if it had said its piece and was content. He worked into his 80s, slower every year but never careless. That last winter I did most of the bench work, while he kept the books and the kettle and the morning winding. He died in February in his sleep in the house he was born in, which is as much as anyone can ask of the schedule. The funeral was on a Thursday, and what with the lawyer and the estate, the shop stayed dark for 11 days. I had the key the whole time, but I could not make myself use it until the paperwork said the place was mine to open. I have stood in some quiet rooms since, and none of them were quiet the way the shop was quiet on the 12th day. Every clock in the place had run down to nothing, mantle and schoolhouse and the banjo with its painted ship, each stopped at its own hour. The rain I had worked inside for 10 years was gone, and my ears kept reaching for it and coming back empty. Then, from the corner by the coat rack, I heard the pendulum. The walnut clock was going. Its weights hung at the very bottom of their run, past the 8th day of an 8-day movement, past the 11th, and the pendulum swung as evenly as it had on my first morning. The hands stood 5 minutes shy of true, exactly where they had always stood, keeping their patient distance from the world. I stood in front of that case a long while with my cap in my hands, and I do not remember taking it off. What I felt was less like fright and more like walking into a room you had thought empty and finding somebody there who was glad you had come. I did not ask the question out loud, and I have never asked it since. Some things in a small trade you inherit, like the drawers and the green lamp, without discussion, because discussion would not improve them. I opened up the next morning at 8, put the kettle on, and went around with the keys and the cranks, winding. The clocks took up their reign again one at a time, like an orchestra tuning, until the room was full of it. I wound the repairs and the finished work, and then the unclaimed watches, every envelope, all the way down the rows. They should not have to lose the habit just because somebody did. That was 9 years ago, and the shop is mine now, and the town is still letting out its breath, though slower. Young couples up from the city bring me kitchen clocks shaped like teapots, and I treat them gently. The walnut clock keeps its corner 5 minutes behind the world, and I dust the case and never touch the screw. Some mornings I set my own watch by it before I set it right, just to walk a while inside its version of the day. At night I stand a moment in the doorway and listen to the rain that is not rain, 40 clocks each, landing a little behind its neighbor. None of them quite agree, and none of them are wrongs. Then I pull the door to and leave them talking among themselves, and their small steady rain follows me all the way home, the way a good sound will.